In the spring of 1923, hunters in the Ozark Hills stumbled into a hollow no one spoke of. Behind a collapsing barn, they found rows of small wooden crosses, 21 at first, then more. The graves were all the same size, all unmarked, and all belonged to a family that never left the hollow, a bloodline that closed its gates, buried its children, and left behind one of the strangest records in American history. The Ozark bloodline was erased from paper, but not from the earth. If you want the next forgotten story, subscribe. The silence has more to tell. In the spring of 1923, two hunters, Eli Yancey and Robert Harlan, walked further into the Ozark Hills than usual. They expected game. What they found instead was a collapsed barn in a narrow hollow, and behind it, a yard of small wooden crosses. Their statement at the courthouse in Madison County was brief. Yancey said the crosses were too many for one place. Harlan said the earth looked fresh-turned. Both refused to go back alone. The county sent Deputy Amos Lyle 2 days later. His memorandum survives in faint type. One-room cabin, plank floor, iron stove, barn fallen in, weeds overtaking beams, burial ground behind the house, 21 child-sized graves laid in 2 rows, crosses carved from saplings, flat on one side, dates scratched with a knife. One marker faintly bore the name Carver. Lyle added by hand, "Not family plot. Too regular. Graves measured. The name Carver appeared in county ledgers, and Elias Carver paid taxes in 1891. 1 mule, 1 rifle." After that, the entries thin out. No marriage license recorded. No deeds filed. By 1900, the census lists a Carver household deep in the hills, but every name is either John, Ruth, or Elias, repeated with ages that don't line up. When state agents compared the 1910 and 1920 rolls, they noticed something stranger. A Ruth Carver, age 8, listed both times. A John Carver, age 12, listed both times. The same names, the same ages, appearing a decade apart. Either clerical error or deliberate substitution. Midwife Clara Phelps wrote about a single visit to the hollow in 1909. Her notebook is preserved in the county archives. Woman in labor, weak. Infant born with twisted limbs. Father took child at once. I asked to baptize. He said no. I smelled lime outside the cabin. Did not return. Her handwriting is steady. The entry is underlined twice. She never recorded the family's name, but she placed the cabin East Ridge, past Carver Creek. A preacher named Jonas Greer gave testimony in 1915, later repeated in a sermon pamphlet. He claimed he entered the Carver home during a snowstorm. He found inside a box wrapped in oilcloth, filled with birth records in English and broken Gaelic. Each infant's name marked with a judgment. Sound, weak, twisted. Not for this world. Greer said he left at dawn. He preached later. They kept graves ready before cradles. Their book was not for salvation. It was for culling. The congregation listened in silence. The school register in Kingston records 3 Carver children attending for only 1 week in 1912. The teacher, Ada Winfield, wrote a margin note. All alike. Long faces, pale hair, pale eyes. Did not play, did not answer, walked out together, did not return. Later, she told a WPA interviewer that the children wrote only one phrase in their copybooks. The line must not break. By June 1923, word spread. The 21 graves Lyle had counted became 30 in rumor. Then 40. Hunters claimed new crosses appeared between visits. A logger swore he heard a baby crying in the hollow. And then silence. Deputy Lyle returned once more, with the sheriff and 2 men from the State Health Board. They did not open graves, but they measured the rows. One doctor, Clive Aronson, made a private note, spacing precise as though plotted in advance. Graves not of accident, but of expectation. In September, a storm cut through the Ozarks. When Lyle rode back, the cabin still stood, though its fence had fallen. In the corner of the yard, someone had stacked fresh sapling wood, thin, straight, enough for 5 more crosses. The deputy did not file this visit. The story survived only because a neighbor repeated it years later. He said Lyle returned at dusk, pale, and told him, "They are digging holes before the children are born." When officials in Little Rock reviewed the 1920 census, the Carver household was flagged. The enumerator had listed 6 children, but their ages were unusual. John Carver, 12. Ruth Carver, 8. Elias Carver, 15. John Carver, 12. Ruth Carver, 8. Elias Carver, 15. The same 3 names repeated. The same 3 ages repeated. When the clerk asked the enumerator about the duplication, the man shrugged. He said the family had been hostile. He had written what they told him and left quickly. "They were all pale," he said. "They looked too much alike." I didn't argue. In 1925, a forest fire swept through the ridge above Carver Hollow. Afterward, loggers found the cabin partly burned. Inside a floorboard, they uncovered a Bible. The Bible contained no scripture notes, only genealogies scrawled in margins. Beside each name was a single word: sound, weak, twisted, or not fit. Some names were crossed out. Others were repeated. A state examiner who reviewed the book wrote, "The family records reveal no marriage outside the name Carver. 5 generations looped back upon themselves. Children marked and buried according to an internal code. No church records, no county filings, only this private ledger." The book was sealed in county archives. The pressed flowers inside had turned to dust. Preacher Jonas Greer, who once found the oilcloth records, issued a second tract in 1926. He no longer named the family directly, but his words were pointed. "In these hills are folk who believe the blood must circle back on itself, lest it weaken. They bury their young before naming, counting graves as proof of faith. Their scripture is not the Lord's, but a tally of flesh. I saw it, I testify it, and I tell you, it is a curse." The tract was handed out at revival meetings. Most were thrown into the fire after reading, but a copy remains in the courthouse safe. In 1927, midwife Clara Phelps was asked to testify formally. She repeated what her notebook already recorded: an infant with twisted limbs, carried outside by its father, before she could baptize. When pressed by the attorney if she had seen burial, she answered, "I smelled lime. I heard the shovel. That was enough." The deposition was filed, but never brought to court. By the late 1920s, neighbors began to speak more freely, though always in hushed tones. Samuel Cobb, a trapper, said he saw a child, with a face too old for its years, watching from the tree line. Lizzie Harlan, whose brother once traded with the Carvers, said the children all looked stamped from the same die. Same eyes, same mouths, same silence. Ezekiel Boone, a farmer, claimed he saw a boy and girl by the river. They stood holding hands. They never spoke. Their faces looked near the same. None of these accounts made it into legal files. They circulated as rumor, passed between families as warnings not to wander into the hollow. Dr. Clive Aronson, who had inspected the graves with Deputy Lyle, kept a private journal. In an entry from 1928, he wrote, "I cannot dismiss what I saw. The graves were not chance. They were preparation. The faces of those children who lived are uniform, features collapsing into sameness. It is degeneration, plain in medical fact. Yet the family persists. They believe they are preserving themselves, but they are ending themselves. This is not ignorance. It is design." The journal was discovered among his effects after his death in 1942. In 1929, another visitor came, Harold Keene, a WPA folklorist. He wrote only 1 page about Carver Hollow. His words were blunt. "They do not speak of them in town. They do not need to. The graves speak." Aligned in rows, as if someone drew the plan on paper and then dug earth to match. The crosses stand waiting. Some are already cut, stacked by the fence. It is not a burial ground. It is a ledger carved into the soil. By then, the graveyard held over 30 small mounds. Keene closed his page with one line: "The carvers are counting ahead." In 1931, retired teacher Ada Winfield gave an interview to a WPA worker. She had already mentioned the Carver children once, but this time her memory carried more weight. 2 boys and a girl, all 3 pale, hair the color of straw, eyes so light they looked white in the sun. They sat in the back and did not write what I told them. They wrote one line over and over. The line must not break. I took their slates away. The next day, they did not return. The interviewer noted that Miss Winfield still refused to walk near Carver Hollow, even 30 years after she had last seen the children. Mail carrier Jasper Boone spoke to the sheriff in 1932. His words were entered only as a side note in county files. "I left a bundle once. 6 envelopes, no stamps, no addresses. When I came back the next week, they were gone. I never saw them again, but I saw a boy, bare feet in the snow, shirt too thin. He did not speak, and his eyes were pale, almost cloudy. He turned and walked into the trees, like he had been waiting for me to leave." Boone refused to carry mail beyond the last ridge after that year. Another carrier was assigned the route. By the early 1930s, the hollow had gained a reputation among hunters. Eli Crawford claimed he saw 3 children standing together in the tree line. They did not move for several minutes. When he raised his rifle, they stepped back and disappeared without sound. George Pruitt said he heard crying one evening, not like an animal, a child. Then it stopped quick, like a door shut on it. Raymond Hale found small footprints near the creek that led toward the Carver place. He followed until they stopped at the fence of crosses. There were no prints beyond. None of the men went back alone. Ledger pages from Kingston General Store show a single entry for July 1933. 20 pounds flour, 10 pounds salt pork, 2 bolts coarse cloth, 1 spool black thread, paid in silver coin, no change required. The storekeeper, Mr. Crowley, wrote in the margin, "Woman with long face, gray dress, boy with her, pale eyes, both silent." I wrote Carver on the sack. It was the last purchase ever recorded under that name. By the mid-1930s, families who lived near Carver Hollow told stories meant to keep children away. If you walk past their fence, they will measure you for a cross. Component placement. If you hear crying at night, it means a Carver child is being buried. Зрение. Вы встретите одного на пути, не отвечайте. They will follow you home. Зрение WPA workers dismissed much of it as superstition, but the burial ground remained, and so did the silence of the Carver household. In 1934, Sheriff Thomas Neely made a formal visit. He reported, "Cabin still standing, smoke rising from chimney. Graves behind cabin counted at 38. Crosses lined in rows, spacing precise uniform. Children visible inside cabin, pale, silent, staring through window. No words exchanged with adults of house." Neely wrote only one sentence in conclusion. "It is not a family cemetery. It is a tally." That same year, a traveling salesman passing through the county claimed he lost his way and wandered into Carver Hollow. He said he saw 3 figures standing in the yard among the crosses. All were children. Their faces were so alike, he thought them reflections of one another. None moved as he passed. When he looked back, they were gone. The crosses, however, were still there, more than he could count before night came on. In 1935, the Arkansas State Board of Health authorized an inspection of Carver Hollow. Reports of child mortality, repeated names in census rolls, and whispers of "a graveyard too neat" forced their hand. Dr. Walter Sims, accompanied by Sheriff Thomas Neely and 2 deputies, rode into the hollow. Sims's surviving notes, archived in the Little Rock, begin plainly. Cabin intact. Yard enclosed. Burial ground now 43 graves. Crosses aligned, equal spacing, all child-sized. Wood weathered but not collapsed. No adult graves visible. Inside the cabin, Sims found 5 living children, 3 girls and 2 boys. He described them as pale, thin, nearly identical in appearance. One boy had a crooked spine. One girl's hand twisted inward. None spoke. The parents, an older man and woman, answered only in fragments. The man gave his name as Elias Carver, though census records had listed an Elias of nearly the same age 20 years earlier. Deputies pried up floorboards and found a tin box wrapped in cloth. Inside were ledgers written in cramped hand. Each page listed births, name, often repeated from a prior generation, a mark, sound, weak, twisted, not fit. The pattern spanned 5 generations. Names looped back on themselves. Cousins wed cousins, brothers to sisters. Each weak or twisted was followed by a date that matched the crosses in the yard. In margins, a phrase appeared again and again. The blood must not break. Another box contained a Bible, its spine broken. Inside, no scripture notes, only genealogies written over holy text. Pages blackened with repetition. Some lines in English, some in Gaelic. One entry read, Ruth, born January 3rd, 1919, week, buried January 7th. Another, Elias, born March, 1921, sound. Sims wrote in his report, "This is not a family Bible. It is a tally of survival. Each entry is less a birth than an experiment." Weeks after the inspection, in the winter of 1936, fire consumed part of the Carver homestead. Locals saw smoke rising from the hollow, but did not go near. When deputies arrived, they found the cabin gutted. The barn collapsed to ash. The patriarch, Elias Carver, was found dead, overcome by smoke. The matriarch was gone. Some claimed she fled into the hills. Others said her body had burned to ash. 3 children were pulled from the ruin. All were alive, but mute, pale, undersized for their ages. They were placed in state custody. Within months, 2 were dead of illness. The 3rd vanished from records. Neighbors told stories afterward. A hunter claimed he saw a woman in gray walking along the ridge at dusk. A boy swore he saw pale children at the river, watching but never speaking. The burial ground remained. When officials returned in 1937, they counted 52 graves, each marked by the same narrow crosses, each aligned with the precision of a ledger. Dr. Sims submitted his final report to the state board. The Carver family practiced generational consanguinity, preserving only those infants they deemed sound. The result is physical deformity, speech impairment, and high infant mortality. The graves are deliberate, each a mark of culling. This is not poverty, nor mere neglect. It is belief. It is design. The report was filed away quietly. Few copies survive. By 1938, Carver Hollow stood abandoned, the cabin reduced to blackened timbers, the barn gone to weeds. But the graveyard endured. 52 crosses, aligned in rows, waiting in silence. One deputy who visited that year wrote only one sentence. "It looks less like a cemetery than a tally kept by the earth itself." By 1940, Carver Hollow no longer appeared on county maps. Surveyors who passed through marked the land as reverted forest. The road trace that once led in was washed out. The state did not repair it. The Carver cabin was ash and timbers. The barn had rotted to earth. Only the graveyard remained, aligned in rows, crosses bleached pale by weather. Locals said the hollow was cursed ground. Children were warned not to play near it. Hunters cut wide around it, even if it meant losing game. No Carver ever came to town again. The Works Progress Administration sent folklorists through Madison County in 1941. They collected songs, sayings, and stories. The Carvers appeared in whispers, never in direct mention. One entry reads, "They did not marry out. They buried quick. Their graves are lined like a soldier's drill. Some say they stacked wood for crosses before the babies were born. Others say the weak ones were taken out before they learned to speak." The collector added in his own words, "The Carvers were not forgotten. They were buried in silence." The people of the scattered testimonies persisted. In 1943, a hunter named Earl McKinney swore he saw a pale child in a gray dress at the tree line. When he called out, the child turned and vanished into brush that would not have hidden a body. In 1944, a farmer's wife said she saw a woman at the river washing cloth. The woman's face was long, the same as all of them. When she looked again, no one was there. In 1946, a boy wandering too far into the ridge returned home pale and silent. When asked what he saw, he only said, "Graves waiting." These accounts never entered official files. They circulated only as warnings. In 1947, a state forester walked into Carver Hollow to mark timber stands. He counted 57 graves. He noted that the crosses were too uniform to be mere family burials. The spacing was measured, the rows deliberate. He wrote one line in his logbook: "It is not a burial ground. It is a record." The logbook remains in state archives. By the 1950s, the Carvers were spoken of only as rumor. Outsiders who asked received shrugs. The courthouse files thinned, pages misplaced, photographs lost. Yet the hollow endured. Weather took the crosses, but the mounds remained. Rows upon rows, visible in winter when the brush died back. The land was never sold. No deeds filed. No families claimed it. It belonged to silence. Even decades later, the sayings lingered in the hills. If you hear crying in the hollow, don't answer. It's a Carver child. If you walk past their fence, they'll measure you for a cross. If you meet one on the road, don't look twice. They'll follow you home. Children dared one another to walk near. None stayed long. By the 1960s, brush covered the hollow. The cabin was gone. The graveyard swallowed by moss and shadow. Yet when the land was cleared briefly for survey, the mounds emerged again, straight, measured, unbroken. No stones, no names, only rows. A WPA worker, long retired, returned once and stood at the fence line. He said the silence was heavier than any church he had known. He wrote afterward, "The Carver bloodline was not erased. It is still there, buried in the earth. The graves are the only testimony. Each one a mark of expectation. Each one a warning. The hollow was never settled again. The Carvers were gone, but their tally remained.